Hello and a very warm welcome to Bharata First. I'm frankrausanpereira. You're watching UPSC Corner. Since you're here, I would like to thank you for your continued support. For those of you who haven't already subscribed, please like the video, subscribe, and then hit the bell icon. And then, of course, all notifications. Do follow our social media handles for all the latest updates, and you can also subscribe to our newsletter to get some incisive content. Here are the UPI IDs for those of you who would like to come forward and contribute. A small contribution you make will be a giant leap for us to keep bringing you this content. So do continue to show your love and support. All this information is in the description of the video, so please go through it. And now it's time to meet a special guest, a gentleman of the first order, someone whom I first met a few years ago on the sets of Rajya Sabha TV. Now he's a supporter of Bharata First, a person who never refuses when we welcome him on our programs. He's a retired IAS officer who was secretary in the Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion, that is DIPP, of the Commerce and Industry Ministry to the Government of India. It is a pleasure to welcome on UPSC Corner Mr. Ajay Shankar. Mr. Shankar, welcome and happy to have you here.
Pleasure joining you today.
So UPSC, we all have seen you in the serious avatar, Mr. Shankar, about, talking about all these important economic issues and all the other issues that concern India's economy. Let's talk about your life's journey as, as a career bureaucrat and talk about how it started. So how did it all start for you? What made you think about a career in the Indian service?
Well, to give you a frank answer, Frank, it was the motivation to be able to render public service. It's a bit of a cliche. Many people say so in interviews, but for me, it was a genuine motivation to be able to be useful and be active in public service and make a bit of a difference to India and to society.
So when did this thought come into your head, Mr. Shankar? When did you first realize that maybe, this is what that you want to do? Did it happen by chance? Were you mentored by someone? What was it really?
It's a very interesting evolution. My case is a bit unusual. I was actually hoping to become a physicist. I was good in science. I was one of the first generation of talented youngsters who were spotted under the National Science Talent scheme of the government. But when I was doing my undergraduation BSc, I came to the conclusion that if I wanted to be at the cutting edge in physics, I should go to the US on a scholarship and be in one of the better universities there, and then I would have a fair chance of being at the cutting edge. And since for a variety of reasons I didn't want to go to the US, so then I gave up doing science and switched to a master's in political science. And it's that phase then the thought started growing on me. Because my father used to be a lawyer, so law was a natural temptation or inclination or a normal path. But while doing MA in political science, I got driven to the idea of public service. I may also add that Allahabad University, where I studied and the town I grew up, so the Allahabad University in those days used to send lots of people into the civil services and the IAS. So there's also a certain culture, a certain milieu where people who were good students thought of writing the civil service exam and kept joining in large numbers.
So, since you're talking about your Allahabad University days, I'm sure that the preparation also started then. How was it to prepare for the, All India service back then to get into the Indian Administrative Service? Was it difficult? Obviously, it's not how it is today. It seems so much more mechanized these days, with all the coaching institutes, with all the material and everything that is available to the young students and aspirants who want to get into the service. But how was it back then?
First of all, I think the competition today is far tougher. There's so many more bright, talented, intelligent people who are educated and who have this as an option. So I'm sure the numbers of bright people who think of it and compete with each other is far larger than it was in my time. But Allahabad, in the time that I was there, the political science program in masters was in some ways designed to make it a little easy for students to write the exam. So in those days, you had to take three, what they used to call lower papers for the civil central services, and two higher papers you wanted to get into the IAS. And the MA Political Science program allowed you to get your five papers with a little bit of effort. And the university had a very active cultural and intellectual atmosphere where there were lots of clubs and debates and discussions on contemporary issues. So you picked up a lot of the stuff in the air which would go into the general knowledge paper or would be useful for writing your essay, which was a compulsory paper those days. And to just give you a flavor of the kind of atmosphere that used to be there in those days. So I recall as a student listening to V.K. Krishna Menon, who was in his twilight years, coming and speaking to students, or a young firebrand Subramaniam Swami, who just become member of parliament, was the youngest, also coming and talking to us. So we had a very lively atmosphere, and then in the arts and in theatre and in culture, it was a very alive campus. So that was kind of more or less enough, and the rest we did on our own. And there were these seniors who worked and got in, left behind notes and things like that, which passed on from generation to generation. So for us in Allahabad in those days, I think coaching institutes didn't exist, and at least in my time, nobody came to Delhi to join a coaching institute. Though when I joined the service and was in Mussoorie in the training academy, many of my batchmates had come through that route from Delhi. So that had begun to happen, but I think our lot from Allahabad just came in on our own.
Since you spoke about the training academy, I must ask you, Mr. Shankar. So, how was the experience at the training academy in Mussoorie? What really stood out for you? What was the experience like?
The experience of the training academy, I would say, is similar to, I think, the very positive experience people get when they go to a first-rate academic institution. You go to an IIT or you go to Harvard or Oxford. You see, it's the people around you. And this was really the creme de la creme in the sense of people who written a very tough exam and got in. So that peer group provided a lot of intellectual stimulation. We learned so much from each other. So that when I go back, is the strongest memory. The other memory is, of course, of a atmosphere and a directing staff which tried to inculcate in us a motivation towards public service as something really worth doing and doing well, and having a slightly higher moral, stature than doing anything else. So that was very strongly driven into us. And the other was this feeling that we were special and we could work wonders when we left Mussoorie. We'd have so much power and so much authority. I mean, a book which was very popular those days, when I look back, I think it misled many of us, but it was written by an ICS officer who was young at independence. So he wrote a 2-volume history of the ICS officers, basically pen portraits, but it was a 2-volume history called The Men Who Ruled India. So some of that got into some of us then, which when I look back, was, I think, not such a good idea. We were not getting trained to rule India, we were getting trained to serve India.
Absolutely.
And then in our directing staff, we had one particularly charismatic person who is the most outstanding civil servants of his generation. He just passed away recently. A gentleman called Mr. B.N. Yugandhar. So he had this passion for public service and tried to impart it to us. And I think he did succeed in getting it into a lot of us that this should be a passion public service rather than just a career or a job.
Absolutely. I think that's very important in today's day and age as well, to take it as, as passion public service and not just another job and not just another career alternative where your career is safe. It has a lot of meaning in today's day and age as well. Mr. Shankar, also, do you remember anything from your interview? What was the board like? What were the kind of questions that you had asked? What you were feeling on the day of the interview itself, on the personality test? Were there butterflies? Were there jitters?
Uh, you see, I had, after doing my master's in political science, become a teacher in Allahabad University, and I taught for 2 years. So that had made a huge difference in terms of self-confidence. So when I went for the interview, I was not particularly nervous because I'd been teaching for 2 years. And so when I look back at the interview, I recall it as a very friendly, intelligent conversation, the details of which elude me today. But clearly, I mean, the interviewers were friendly. It was an intelligent conversation. And as I said, I was not as nervous as many of my fellow interviewees were, or many of my subsequent batchmates were, because I was not nervous on the account that I'm going for an interview which would make such a big difference to my prospects of getting into the service. So therefore, I was more relaxed. So the one advice I would give to younger people is uh, try and be relaxed, be yourself, and don't try to be somebody else. And try to be authentic. So whatever your views are, whatever your knowledge is, the interview board is wanting to judge you as a person. It's not an occasion for them to judge your knowledge or to take a favorable view because you take a particular position on a particular issue. So as long as your views on any topic are not too extreme for to make people feel a little uneasy, it's fine, I think. So be yourself, be authentic, be relaxed, be confident.
Let's talk about your first posting as well. UP card, it was, wasn't it? And how was it? Was it difficult? Was it challenging? Was it as expected? How was it really?
Oh, my first postings were very interesting, very challenging, very exciting. And I have all kinds of memories which could go into a book of, funny anecdotes or, serious stuff. So to narrate a funny anecdote, I mean, I'm still not big built, but when I joined and got my first posting, I was, I think, about 23, 24 years old and very slender, and I'm not tall. And my first job was as sub-divisional magistrate in Baghpat, which is an area next to Delhi, where people are generally big built and well built. So I remember two anecdotes I was narrating, which are both funny. So one is that I wanted to discover rural India because I had grown up in Allahabad. So in some ways, I was a very typical part of what is today described as a Lutyens Delhi wala, but the Allahabad civil lines wala. Been to an English medium school, didn't know anything about India outside the city and the university. So I was traveled a lot and tried to visit as many villages as possible and get a feel of the real India that I was supposed to be serving. So by that time, modernization had begun to happen. Most villages I got a cup of tea on a table with a tablecloth and some chairs. But this particular village was a bit backward. I mean, this is 40, 50 years back almost. And this was, I won't take name of community, but not a dominant peasant community, but slightly below. I mean, this is on the banks of the Yamuna, it's not all next to Delhi. So there was an old, crusty old Padhan who was sitting on the charpai or khatia, and he had his hookah. Of course, he was polite, he was not smoking the hookah. So village brought a tall glass of fresh milk, really tall glass, to serve it to me. So this was about 10:15 in the morning. So I was making a fuss. I said, I don't want it. I can't have it. I've just had my breakfast. So the cryptic comment that came from him was, "Arey abhi tu to launda hai, doodh pi, sehat bana," which means drink that milk, make yourself more sturdy and robust. You're still a kid. So I promptly was challenged. I gulped down that whole big glass of milk in one go and tried to look as stern and officer-like as I could. Or another occasion, because my immediate number two was the Tehsildar, I was sub-division straight. So he was a very fine gentleman, very distinguished looking, also attractive and well dressed, and he must have been in the late 40s, and I was this kid in 22, 23. So whenever we went together, nobody knew who I was or what I was. So he was probably perpetually struggling to put me in front and tell the people that the garlands were for me and not for him.
Thank you, Mr. Shankar, for taking us through those lovely anecdotes. It must be bringing back fond memories for you as well, recounting all these incidents and recounting all these things that have happened. On the job, what was the most challenging aspect, and what is it that you felt was the most difficult thing, and how did you overcome it?
See, the service to which I joined, the IAS, so this is amazing, I think, in terms of India and maybe the world, and we go further in terms of a long span of time, because the variety it offers, the range of challenges it offers, and the different skill sets that you need for doing your job well, depending on the nature of the job. I mean, this is unparalleled, I think. So if I look back at my own career, it is really quite extraordinary. So in the last lab, when say you are in the government of India, and at the senior most positions, you're really grappling with very complex policy issues, and there are no easy answers, and you need to bring to the table a lot of experience as well as an understanding of what would work in India, a sense of judgment of what is practical in India, and which is where the better members of my service serve the country well, because they bring a feel for the realities of India, which helps them take a better call on what is the best way to go forward. In your younger days, or even in senior positions, you are in a field position, you're like a CEO of an organization. You got to deliver results with whatever resources you have. And the resources are always limited in terms of both money as well as talent. So with what you have to manage. Then there are other situations where you have to deal with a crisis. Something unforeseen has happened, and you have to somehow cope with it and deliver, and give people the feeling that the government is with them and is doing as good a job as is possible. So the nature of the challenge and the skills you need to come out successfully vary with the responsibility and with time. So it's a absolutely fascinating, challenging experience for most of the way, most of the journey.
Yes, please go on.
To give us more precise kind of examples, I'll refer to two. One was practically at the end, we were hit by the 2008 financial crisis, and the Indian economy went into a free fall. And I was Secretary DIPP, which is the industry part of the commerce industry. And I tended to be more accessible to people, which I would certainly advise all those who join or who are in the service, that your great asset would be your accessibility and your willingness to hear people and get a sense of what's going on. So very early on, I got the feeling that the economy was in a free fall before the rest of the system saw it as going into a free fall. So I kept arguing within government that things are much worse than they seem to be. And then government woke up and realized that it was a serious crisis. And so the government moved very decisively, not today remembered, but a group of 4 secretaries were set up with the challenge of meeting every day and to come up with a set of ideas which government could consider and act upon. And being the industry secretary, I therefore had the maximum reach and reached out to the largest number of people. It was huge education, and then in about 4 to 6 weeks, we were able to put together what we call the stimulus package measures. It went up to government, it was approved. And so within 6, 8 weeks, we had 2 stimulus packages announced within 2 days. And they delivered extraordinary results. So the economy, which had gone down to a growth rate of 5%, got back to 8% within 2 quarters. And again, it's an example of how resilient the system can be. The bulk of these packages were implemented when the election was announced for the 2009 parliament. And the code of conduct was in place, and we were able to persuade the election commission that we will not have public events, the government will not take credit for it, the MPs won't even know what's happening, but just let us get the economy back on track. And the election commission was also very cooperative, and we were able to succeed. So that's one end of the career. And the other is, say, younger days. I was secretary to the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi, and the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi those days had full responsibility. We didn't have a chief minister those days. And he certainly had a complete responsibility for the law and order in the police. And so Mandal happened, and the students were on the streets. And of course, I was just a staff officer, but I think the Lieutenant Governor and the Delhi police did an extraordinary job of being on the fine line between using excessive force and beating up the students and having more injured students in hospital or casualties or deaths. And on the other end, in not allowing them to take over the city of Delhi. So on both fronts, I think a very fine line was drawn. And there I got a taste of what good leadership means. So the Lieutenant Governor those days was Air Chief Marshal Arjun Singh. He was not young. He'd been the Air Chief in '65, a war hero, one of the few who got gallantry awards from the British for work done when he was an Air Force officer before independence. So he gave the police the right kind of leadership and the right kind of confidence, because in the union government, those who had put in place the Mandal dispensation wanted a hard crackdown on the students and felt the Delhi police was sympathetic to the students, was going too soft. They were all upper caste, and their naturally sympathies lay with the upper caste students who were opposing Mandal. So there was a lot of flack they were facing, which, being a tall man with broad shoulders, he was told to tell the police commissioner, let them talk to me. And on the other side, he was very supportive of police in trying to strike the right balance. So at the end of the day, when everybody was tired, they would come to his office for a meeting, and depending on if the students had gone home, they would come. So sometimes 5:30 in the evening, sometimes 6 in the evening, in a very genial, relaxed Air Chief Marshal Arjun Singh would greet them. Sumptuous tea and snacks and confectionery would arrive. And then as the police officers began to relax, they would say, okay, what happened where? You tell us, and wiping perspiration, they would also relax and narrate what had happened.
Absolutely. Let me talk about another aspect also. We've seen that in the service, many people from within the service, meet each other, fall in love, get married, and then continue their lives after on as well. Similar is the story with you too. You're married to an Indian Foreign Service officer. So was that challenging at all to juggle and to just live life normally, Mr. Shankar?
Well, we met in Mussoorie, so in some ways it's a classic fairy tale. We decided to get married, and when we decided to get married, that was the most important thing. We consciously chose that that's what we wanted, and so the careers and the implications for our careers was not important in our minds. But I must say, I mean, God and government have been very kind to us, so both of us have managed to do well enough in our respective careers, and it's been a great journey. But
so it's not that difficult. So it's not that difficult.
Obviously, there's a willingness to, try and be together and also put up with some separation and so on.
Absolutely. If you have to send out a message.
So one of the quips I picked up, and which I used to keep telling friends and relatives, is sometimes, absence makes the heart grow fonder and stuff like that.
I'm sure it does. I'm sure it does, and each and every one of us has gone through that at some phase in our lives as well, so we can understand
But
and relate to that.
I may add that I think the government of India has been far ahead of the curve in terms of being accommodative to working couples who work for government and at all levels. So we were very privileged at all levels. I think there's been a degree of empathy and support for working couples, working women, women with children, uh, which has been far greater in India than I think has been the case in other societies at that point of time.
Absolutely, absolutely. Any message, Mr. Shankar, that you would like to send out to young, budding, aspirants who want to follow in your footsteps, who want to become IAS officers, who want to lead the nation, serve the nation, and serve the public?
Uh, so then let me speak very frankly. So India today offers enormous opportunities in every sphere. So if you have ambition, then a lot of ambition, and a desire to be, celebrity, then I think choosing the government is not a good idea. You can be a film star, you can be an entrepreneur and be on business magazine pages, or you could enter politics and be a member of parliament or a minister very young. So in fact, I remember Allahabad University, it used to be a center of a lot of youth politics those days. So those who fought student elections, union elections, did very well in politics thereafter. And one of them, I remember taunting some of us that the best that will happen to you is that you will get into the government, either the state civil service or the central service. I will enter politics, I'll be a minister before you become a secretary to government. And he was right, he didn't become a minister before we became secretary. So similarly, you want money, then entrepreneurship, sky is the limit today. You can be a startup and you can achieve just anything. So if you want money, become an entrepreneur. Startup world is opened up in India. You can be whatever a billionaire before 40, even in India today. If you want politics, go there, become a minister or an MP. If you want to be otherwise a star somewhere else in some other manner, do that. Even if you want money, the private sector offers a lot more by way of salary, so go there. So if you want to join the service, you should be willing to join it for a somewhat sober life, a life of a bit of selfless service. You will still get enough prestige. There will be enough ribbon cutting that you'll do and enough garlands that will be put around you, enough people wanting to meet you and seek favors small and large. But join it if you are motivated by the challenge of making a difference. Join it if you think you can make a difference. And you'll make a bit of difference to the public good and the public cause. You will also succeed and you'll get a lot of adulation. But a bit of anonymous, faceless public service should be a key motivator for you. And fortunately, the service still offers huge challenges, huge opportunities. It pays decently, it doesn't pay too well, but it pays decently enough for you to live honestly and and in a manner in which you need not feel too much of a pinch. And uh, in some ways, I mean, my late mother used to always say something which I try and tell younger people these days, that the biggest wealth I can leave you is your education and your character. And so value that. Money comes and goes. And don't get into this, the grass is greener on the neighboring fence or whatever.
Absolutely. No, since you
And,
brought
and
this up, yes, please.
in this day and age, I think we would serve our children well if we didn't make them prisoners of the consumerism which is hitting them 24/7.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would like to end on that note, but since you brought this up, I must ask you another question because it was a good note to end on. But Mr. Shankar, what do you make of the activism and all the social media stars that we see from the service? I mean, do you approve of it? Do you not approve of it? What are
No,
your thoughts?
I am old fashioned. So I think that they, I mean, anybody who's serving his loyalties to the government. And so his social media presence should be restricted to the private world or the world of literature, art, etc., but certainly not on public issues. And on public issues, he or she should make her presence felt on the social media only insofar as it is a requirement of the public duty that he is discharging. So if you're a district magistrate and you do need to communicate on Facebook and Twitter to get your message out to enough people, please do so, but do so as the district magistrate and not as the individual you are.
Absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
because till you are in government, you are serving government, you may have a name, but it's the office that you occupy, and that's the privilege you have. When you leave government, you can become a star or a celebrity on your own right. But till then, I think it's good to be conscious of the fact that you serve government and you occupy a particular chair, that has a public responsibility. And you don't really should want to exist outside that.
Absolutely.
Except in the sense that you get respect and affection and loyalty as an individual because of the work you do on while discharging that responsibility. And
Be
I think
known for the work you
and I
do.
would end by saying government would be well advised in advising its employees that go there only in the discharge of your official responsibilities and to the extent that requires it. Let it not come in the way of doing your job properly because the job is demanding. And no matter how energetic you are, there is only so much time that you have in the day and only that much that you can do.
Absolutely. Very, very wise words, Mr. Shankar. Thank you so much for your time. I think there are so many takeaways from this particular interaction that we've had. If you want the money, go into business. If you want fame, get into the film industry. If you want to serve the public, come into the All India service. On that note, I'll call it a wrap on this edition of UPSC Corner. A pleasure having you on the program, Mr. Shankar. Thank you so very
Thank you.
much for your
Pleasure
time.
being here. And you took me down memory lane. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Once again, thank you for your continued support. For those of you who haven't already subscribed, please like the video, subscribe, hit the bell icon, and then all notifications. Do follow our social media handles for all the latest updates, and you can also subscribe to our newsletter to get some incisive content. Here are the UPI IDs for those who would like to come forward and contribute. A small contribution you make will be a giant leap for us to keep bringing you this content. So do continue to show your love and support. All this information is in the description of the video, so please go through it. That's it from me. See you again next time.